Welcome, welcome, welcome. My name is Eli Saltzman. We'll start in a moment. Thank you so much for joining us. Once again, we are recording this special online event. Thank you so much for coming. Hold on, I'm going to admit more people who are entering the event. We have not done a Zoom meeting in a long time, so I'm very, very excited about that. It makes it more dynamic. You can see faces. If you're online and you can turn on the camera, that'd be awesome. It kind of feels like you're in my living room in a sense, and we can have a conversation. But don't forget to mute yourself. That'd be very helpful. And we'll start in a moment. There you go. So if you're joining us, welcome, welcome, welcome. We'll start in a few seconds. Thank you so much. Good to see all these faces. We're still waiting for some more people to show up, and then we'll start. We are recording this event today. Oh, this is brilliant to see all these faces. Fantastic. Hope you're all warm and safe. It is freezing cold in our neck of the woods. It's been, my car is set on centigrade. I still refuse to adopt the Fahrenheit system, so it was 7 below. It was -7 degrees. Very, very cold. Very, very cold. Indeed. All righty, I'll give it another minute, and then we'll start the event. There you go. We have more people. Yes. Admitting all. If you can mute yourself when you join us, that would be awesome. That would be very helpful. Don't forget that, just to avoid the background noise. Alrighty, hold on. I'm admitting a few more people in. Fantastic. Alrighty, more people are coming in. Come on, folks. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We'll start in a few seconds. We are recording this. Be mindful of that and behave. Please behave. If you join us, please if you can, turn on the camera. It will be nice to see all your faces. And just don't forget to mute yourself so we don't have these background noises as you join the conversation. Alrighty, it's 12:32, which means that it's about time. We are recording this event once again. My name is Eli Saltzman. I am delighted to see you all here. I am an associate research professor of Israel Studies and the director of the Gildenhorn Institute for Israel Studies at the University of Maryland, College Park. I'd like to express my deepest gratitude to Avis Koyman and Srusti Suresh for all the work and assistance behind the scenes that make this and all other events possible. I'd like to thank the audience for joining us today for the final event of the semester, a special book talk titled Collapse, Israeli Labor Party 1992-2024, featuring Ori Veltman, whom I'll introduce momentarily. You can find links to the recordings of all our events by visiting www.israelstudies.umd.edu, or please visit our YouTube channel. Just type in the search engine, the Gildenhorn Institute for Israel Studies. It will get you there. Now to the main event. In the past, most of our previous events have focused on various aspects of October 7th, 2023, and the subsequent war in Gaza. Today, we turn our attention perhaps away towards a political as well as a social story that has shaped the trajectory of Israeli public life for more than 3 decades. The dramatic rise, decline, and almost disappearance of the Israeli Labor Party or the labor movement, we'll talk about that perhaps, between 1992 and 2024. For much of Israel's history, the Labor Party, previously Mapai and then Ma'arach or Alignment, was not just a political party or a political movement. It was the country's dominant force, the architect of its institutions, its economy, and its security doctrine. In 1992, for example, under Yitzhak Rabin's leadership, labor returned to power with a mandate to redefine Israel's future, launching the Oslo process and reopening debates about peace, national identity, and the place of Israel in the Middle East. But the decades that followed tell a different story. The party's electoral collapse, organizational fragmentation, and the shifting of social and ideological landscape in Israel have transformed labor from a pillar of national leadership into a rather marginal political actor. Still, I would argue, understanding the parties or the movement's collapse is not only about tracking political fortunes, it's about understanding deeper changes within Israeli society, demographic shifts, security anxieties, economic transformations, and evolving collective stories about the country's direction. Today's talk will explore these dynamics in depth. As Israel continues to change and face profound and possibly existential challenges at home and abroad, the lessons of the Labour Party's rise and fall offer a window into how political movements adapt, fracture, or fade in this case. It is with great pleasure and honor I'd like to introduce today's speaker. Dr. Ori Veltman is a research fellow at the University of South Wales in the UK and a lecturer in the master's program in international security and risk management. His areas of interest include national security, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, counterterrorism, Middle East, and Israeli politics. His articles are published in academic outlets as well as his commentary that appears regularly in Israeli and international media. Dr. Veltman is the author of Collapse, today's book talk, Israeli Labour Party 1992-2024, and he will discuss this topic today with us. It came out in Hebrew earlier this year, will be translated into English, right? It's being translated, that's correct. He's also the author of Israel, National Security and Securitization. As always in these events, Dr. Veltman will talk for about 35 minutes or so, and then we'll open the floor for Q&A. Today, in a Zoom setting, that will be much more interactive and dynamic, I hope. Thank you so much for attending. Dr. Veltman, the floor is all yours, my friend.
Thank you very much, Eli. It's a great honor. Let's share the screen because I made a short presentation for all of you just to simplify the sad story of the Labour Party. Can you all see? Wonderful. Great. So first of all, I wish to mention that the book was written with the great support of the Israel Center for Grad Strategy, the ICGS, where I serve also as a research fellow, in addition to University of South Wales in the UK. And as you mentioned, Eli, the book was published in Hebrew by Wrestling, and the updated English version, which will also include the upcoming elections in Israel, will be published by Routledge next year. And speaking about the book, I actually started working on that book in the summer of 2020 during the COVID pandemic, when it seems that the Labour Party was about to be erased from the political landscape in Israel after polls predicted it would win 0 seats. And as someone who knew the party very well, both as the grandson of a party MK, member of Knesset, as a key activist in the party's youth, and afterwards as the political advisor of the Labour chairman, and even as a candidate for the Knesset, I felt it was appropriate to try and understand what had happened to the Labour Party since the 1992 upheaval. I want to share with you 2 slides that I think will help to tell the sad story of the Labour Party. Check this out. We can see here the results that the Labour Party gained in seats on every elections. From 1992, we can see it won 44 seats in the parliament, in the Knesset, and we can see that sharp decline after 3 decades, just 4 seats. Of course, in the middle, we see it was gradual, but we can see in the middle like a jump to 24 seats. It was in the 2015 elections, but it wasn't just the Labour Party. As you remember, there was the Zionist Union and it was a merger between the Labor and Hatnuah led by Tzipi Livni. And I want to show you another slide. Over here, we can see it's all around the book. In every chapter in the book, when I discuss the elections, I try to show what happened also in several cities. And over here, what we can see, it's a comparison between 1992 and 2022 elections. We can see that the first four cities here, Ashdod, Beersheba, Kiryat Gat, and Netanya, they're actually right-wing cities. What do I mean when I'm saying right-wing city? It means that the majority over there supports the right-wing parties, around 60% and sometimes even 90%. But we can see here that in 1992, for example, in Ashdod, Labor Party won third of the votes. It's amazing. In Beersheba, they won even 34. In Netanya, almost 36. But look what happened after 3 decades. Barely 1 to 2%. You know, the threshold in Israel, it's 3.25%. Had the elections been held only in those cities, the Labor would never enter the parliament. The last three cities, we can see Givatayim, Haifa, and Tel Aviv, they are center left-wing cities. For example, Givatayim, as probably many of you know, it's the most Mapainikit city in Israel. There is a joke saying that the old people in Givatayim, their hand will shake when they won't put the Emet note in the ballot. And we can see that in 1992, the Labor won just above 50%. This is amazing. It's equivalent to 60 mandates, 60 seats in the parliament. Look what happened after 3 decades, just above 10%. Haifa, the red city, 45%, and only barely 5% after 3 decades. Tel Aviv, the most liberal city in Europe, like people like to say, almost 40%, but in the last elections, less than 10. It's quite shocking, you know, it's quite sad if you're a Labor supporter. And let's say in conclusion, not just yet, but as the previous 2 slides have clearly illustrated to us, there is no doubt that the Labor Party, the party that founded the State of Israel, as many like to say, is the sad story of Israeli politics over the past 3 decades. But the main question that this book seeks to examine is, what are the reasons why the Labor Party transformed from a ruling party that represented the mainstream of Israeli society to a marginal and, sorry to say, unimportant left-wing party in the Israeli political landscape? In the process, let's say in that process, is the reason for the collapse of the Labor Party due to the collapse of the Oslo process with which the party was identified, or did the party collapse because, let's say, the Israeli public shifted to the right in its views while Labor shifted to the left? Does the main reason for the collapse stem from the predatory nature of the party, or the political alternatives established in the center-left bloc, the main reason for the collapse of the Labor Party? So in order to solve the conundrum of the Labor Party's collapse and also tell its story from 1992 to 2024, I conducted dozens personal interviews with Labor Party chairmen and members of Knesset and other central figures in the political system throughout the period, for instance, Ehud Olmert, Tzipi Livni, and many others. And in addition, I reviewed the press during that period. Believe me, it was a long time in the archives. And also read biographies and autobiographies of the main figures of Labor. And finally, I also conducted an analysis of election results and public opinion polls over the past 3 decades. So we'll move to the next slide, and here we actually see the 3 stages of the the evolution of the collapse of the Labour Party. The first stage is, I call it Oslo Party, between 1992 and 2001. The second stage is ideological tension between 2001 and 2019. And the third stage is shift to the left, I call it, from 2019 to 2024. Why 2024? That time, it's, let's say, I will talk about it a bit later, but this is the political death of the Labour Party, because there is no longer a Labour Party. They merged with Meretz, and now we have a new brand, the Democrats. I will talk about it a bit later. So let's start delving into the first stage, Oslo Party. You can see the pictures of the beginning of that stage, almost the beginning of the stage, and actually the end of that stage. So during that stage, Labour Party is led by figures of, how should I say it, public stature. As you know, Yitzhak Rabin, Shimon Peres, Ehud Barak. And during that time, the Oslo peace process was at the top of the party's agenda. However, as you probably remember, the outbreak of the Second Intifada in September 2000 and the collapse of the Oslo process led to the Israeli public's loss of confidence in the political security agenda led by the Labour Party and its leaders. And actually, this was clearly expressed in Ehud Barak's crushing defeat to Ariel Sharon in the 2001 election for prime minister. The gap between those two in the elections was 25%. This is a huge gap. And another thing is that during that period, centrist parties emerged and attempted unsuccessfully to challenge the hegemony and dominance of the Labour Party as the largest party in the center-left bloc. You probably remember in 1996 election, the Third Way, led by Avigdor Kalani, it won only 4 seats. And the next election is in 1999. Remember the Center Party, headed by Itzik Mordechai and Amnon Shachak, Dan Meridor, Roni Milo. They won only 6 seats. They were the great promise at the beginning, but they failed to do so. And we also remember Yair Lapid's father, Tommy Lapid, Yosef Lapid, with Shinui Party. They won 6 seats at the beginning when they ran for the Knesset in the 1999 elections. And during all that period, as you probably remember, the Labour Party, most of the time, they were the ruling party. And of course, as a result, they led successfully the center-left bloc. Jumping to the next stage, there are several phrases. We see many faces here, but there are several faces missing here. It's Fuad Ben Eliezer and also Ehud Barak. I couldn't find another picture, I'm sorry, but you got the message. Too many chairmans, okay? Sorry to say, most of them are my friends. I know them personally, and they were interviewed to this book. Many used to say in Israel that the Labour Party changed its chairman like socks. Okay, of course, those great people are not socks, but you understand the metaphor here. What happened during that stage, the ideological tension stage, is that Labour, as I said, changed its character time and time again, both in terms of its leadership and also in terms of its ideological agenda. And this is very important, from political security agenda to social and economic agenda, and vice versa, of course. There was, in fact, a gradual process of the Labour Party's loss of hegemony and dominance as the main party of the center-left bloc. As I mentioned, Shinui in 2003. In the 1999 election, they won 6 seats, but in the next election, they won 15 seats. Kadima in 2006, and especially in 2009. You probably remember that in 2006, many Likud voters vote for Kadima, headed by Olmert. But in the 2009 elections, Likud gained back all the support from the former Kadima voters in 2006. And this time, Tzipi Livni main support was based from Labour Party supporters. We remember Yesh Atid 2013, and of course Blue and White in 2019 elections. We'll talk about this a bit later. But all of those center parties based on traditional Labour Party supporters. Also, the Israeli public has lost faith in the Oslo path, an agenda that the Labour Party and most of its leaders continue to champion, even after the eruption of the Second Intifada. They still believed in that solution. Yet the party was unable to return to power, even when it began to adopt a social democratic agenda and focus on socioeconomic issues. Another main aspect, and it is very interesting, and I think it's mandatory to understand what happened to Labour, is that the Labour Party has ceased to be a magnet for well-known public figures, and I will explain. In fact, those figures, for example, Benny Gantz, it's the sole example for this, all of them who would have joined very easily to Labour Party without hesitation in the past. You probably remember that many former IDF general Matan Vilnai, Ehud Barak, the Ori Or back then in the 1980s, Mota Gur, and many others automatically joined after they finished their military service. They joined the Labour Party, Yitzhak Rabin. But this time, Benny Gantz and others, they refrained from doing so. Why? Because they were disgusted, sorry to say, by the organizational culture and the party's institutions, which had hardly changed since the days of Mapai in the 1950s. But another thing was that those figures also believed that the Labour Party brand was no longer perceived positively among the Israeli publics, and it was true. And they also believed that under a new brand, they would be able to win greater public support. And they were right. In fact, this phenomenon negatively affected the Labour Party's electorate in the center-left bloc, which of course gradually became crowded following the establishment of a number of center parties. As the support that those centrist parties won in the election was mainly at the expense of who? You guessed correctly, the Labour Party. Let's jump to the next slide, to the third stage, shift to the left. And over here, of course, following the establishment of Blue and White, led by Benny Gantz, which there is no doubt was a party that represented the mainstream of Israeli public. There was lots of resemblance between Blue and White in 2019 and also in the next two elections in 2019 and 2020 to the Labour Party in 1992. So what happened? The result was that the Labour Party actually lost its electoral base. You remember the first slide I showed you, from 24 seats, bang, to seat only. Even though I mentioned this in the book, Avi Gabay, in my opinion, did everything. He did everything quite right. He ran on a centrist party platform, but the problem was that against him was Benny Gantz. No one could have defeated Benny Gantz. Okay, and we saw it in the election. So as a result, the fear of not passing the electoral threshold led to a technical merger with left-wing Meretz party. And this move that practically labeled the Labour Party as a left-wing party. It's funny, why? Because I also remember this when I was in the Labour Party. If in the past, figures from the Labour Party said that they were not a left-wing party like Meretz, they always use the excuse of Meretz. They say, we are a center-left party. We're not a left-wing party like Meretz. But after what happened after the merger with Meretz, they could no longer escape the label of a left-wing party. What they can say, we are together with them, so we're probably a left-wing party. And if this was not enough, following the failed short union with Meretz, there was a sharp turn to the left, ideologically, in the Labour, under the leadership of Merav Michaeli. And although she used to declare time and time again that she was following in his footsteps of Yitzhak Rabin. I think that those statements were quite ridiculous, and it's not what I'm thinking. It's what the Israeli public think. It's also what the labor supporters thought. In practice, there was no resemblance between her and Rabin. You know, maybe only in the letters emet on the ballot, just that. Many also remember Merav Michaeli's decision not to run on a united list with Meretz in the 2022 elections, which would have prevented the center-left bloc from losing votes. However, it is important to note that even if there were a union between Labor and Meretz in the 2022 elections, and I checked it mathematically, trust me on this, the right-wing bloc would still win a majority in the Knesset, but of 62 MKs. If someone is angry why the right won the election, 64 seats, he needs to blame the Arab parties, okay? But even so, in a scenario that the Arab parties are united in a joint list and Meretz and Labor goes together, the results would be a draw of 60, okay? The left wing, according to those results, the center-left bloc, would never win the 2022 elections, okay? Let's jump to the current status of the Labour Party. There is no longer a Labour Party, as you see. And following Michaeli's failed era, there was the establishment of the Democrats Party under Yair Golan, who was elected to lead the Labour Party after Michaeli's resignation. He won 95% of the votes. It remembered many people in Israel vote in Syria. I'm not saying that the Labour Party is not a democratic party and the elections were fraud, but Yair Golan back then was in its heyday with the public support, especially in the center-left bloc and also in the Labour Party, and also against him, sorry to say, no one could have challenged him, okay? There were no other competitors against him with a very high stature. And in fact, the union with Meretz and the establishment of the Democrats was a move that symbolized the political death of the Labour Party. And the Democrats are currently receiving around, let's say, 10 seats in the polls, sometimes more, sometimes a bit less, which is actually about the same amount of power that Labor and Meretz had when they ran separately. So nothing changed. They're just together, and they will probably 100% pass the threshold, but we can't see that things change when those two parties running together now. So despite the hope that Yair Golan could lead the center-left bloc and provide an alternative to Netanyahu and the right, his controversial statements distanced him from the mainstream of Israeli society. You all remember when he called for civil disobedience in Israel. And of course, his shocking words that Israel becoming a pariah state, killing babies as a hobby. Of course, he said he apologized to those statements afterwards, but the damage has been done. I want to show you a final slide that really tells you all the story, okay? And I guess you heard about Ramat HaSharon. Ramat HaSharon, it's a city that, according to my knowledge, if you want to really understand the center-left bloc, check out the results of the elections in Ramat HaSharon. Ramat HaSharon, it's a very liberal and center-left city. And you can see what happened in the chart. We can see the Labor in blue in 1992 elections, almost 46% of the votes. Meretz, almost 80% of the votes, and there were any center-left parties. Actually, the Labor Party was the centrist parties back then under Rabin. And we can see here that there is a decline Of course, as we said at the beginning, 2015 marks difference because of the Zionist Union. But look what happened in 2020. The blue and white, of course, in its comprehensive version, together with Yair Lapid, Benny Gantz, and the rest, almost 60% of the votes in Ramat HaSharon. And the Labor, 10.8, together with Meretz, actually. We can see that before it won just almost 7%. Look what happened to the Labor Party over here. And as I said, Ramat HaSharon illustrated what happened also in the rest of the country. Again, if you're a Labor supporter, it's really a sad story. So in summary, it can be determined that the collapse of the Labor Party since 1992 resulted from three main factors. First, the collapse of the Oslo process and the loss of support for it among the Israeli public. The second is the establishment of centrist parties that were based electorally on Labor Party supporters. And third, an ideological shift of the Labor Party to the left side of the Israeli political spectrum. And of course, it will be very interesting to see what happens in the upcoming 2026 elections. And you can read all of this in the English version of the book, which will be published after the elections, as I mentioned. Thank you so much. And I will be happy to have lots of questions and challenging of them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ori. Thank you so much. Folks, you can either raise your hand. It's a conversation now. So you can raise your hand or you can type the question in the chat box at the bottom of your screen. But I'll take advantage of the fact that I'm a despot, I'm a dictator, and I'm going to ask the first question. Can you put this in a broader perspective, Ori, with your permission? Talk about kind of the 1990s saw a major decline in the power or the influence of big parties and the rise of the individual policymaker or the individual politician. And again, Benjamin Netanyahu in 1996 is the ultimate kind of example of this effort to try to create an Israeli version of the Kennedy family kind of image, so to speak. So can you think about that, kind of the 1990s? What does it say about the Labor Party when you have decline of big parties, increase or strengthening of individuals as main actors? And what does it say about the Labor Party's ability to adapt, to adjust, to acclimate to this new environment?
Okay, first of all, in the 1990s, as we remember, they changed the system of voting. If we remember in 1992, it was the last time, of course, it was changed in 2003, but it was the last time in the 1990s that Israelis voted in one note. The first they vote only for the party, but what happened in the 1996 elections and in the 1999 elections, and also in the 2001 election, but it was also for prime minister, the Israelis voted in the two notes, one for prime minister and the second for a party. So it's automatically, if I was, let's say, a Labor Party supporter, but I supported, in my opinion, people vote not really for a party, they vote for a chairman, and I can prove it. We can see it in the polls. Because I give you an example, before the primaries, let's say for Kadima, when Livni ran against Mofaz in the end of 2008, many people voted for Livni because they saw in the polls that she will win 30 seats in the Knesset elections, while Mofaz will get less than 20. So if I'm thinking that that people voting for a chairman. So if I wanted to vote for Rabin, and this is what happened in the 1992 election, many former Likud voters voted for Labor because of Rabin and because they were centrist. And if I wanted Rabin and I could vote for him or for Shimon Peres in a special note for prime minister, in the election for prime minister, I can choose whatever party that I want. And what it did, as you mentioned, it enhanced, let's say, the small parties. And we saw it again in 1999. And what we saw in 2003, suddenly the Likud jumped back to 38 seats. Why? Because they changed back the system, and also because of the popularity of Ariel Sharon. But the decline of the Labour Party in the 2003 was, as I said, mainly because of the collapse of the Oslo peace process. Mitzna was a good candidate, but let's say the zeitgeist and the atmosphere back then was the second intifada and against the failed Oslo peace process, according to Israeli public. So regarding Netanyahu, if you can I don't know how to answer the question. If you can repeat the question, because I didn't understand the connections, or if you can simplify
if
more.
Political parties are declining, if the ideological conversation is weakened, and
Now I understand.
individuals.
Okay, people, in my opinion, people vote for a chairman. I said it. People, also myself, but most of the people that vote for a chairman, nobody remembers who are the ministers. I remember when I was the advisor of Bougie, of Isaac Herzog, when he was a candidate in 2011, when he ran to the premiership of the Labour Party, I told him, listen, he said to me, not everyone knows me in the Israeli public. I told him, listen, because you're a minister, but you're this in English it's the social minister. Maybe I pronounced it wrongly, but you're not the foreign affairs minister or this defense minister. Of course, you're not prime minister. When you will be the chairman of the Labour Party, people will know you more. So again, the public doesn't know really who are the members of Knesset. I will tell you a secret. I'm a scholar that deals with Israeli politics. I breathe it all day long. Even I don't know all the parliament members because they don't really matters. You know, sometimes when someone in the Likud start to scream, I did this, I did that, and people say, look at those people, I say they're not really important. What is important, it's what Netanyahu says, let's say Israel Katz said. But I think this is something that today people are voting for leaders, not for a party.
Okay, fair enough. Alrighty, there's a bunch of questions in the chat box, and I strongly encourage you either to raise your hand and speak or type your questions or comments in the chat box at the bottom of your screen. There's a question, can you connect the dots in the failed Oslo process in terms of what is the causal connection? What led from A to B? Oslo fails, Labour declines. Can you describe that a bit?
Why the Oslo
Please don't forget to mute yourself, folks, when you're joining the conversation. Please go, Dr. Veltman.
Why the Oslo peace process failed?
No. Can you connect the dots? It failed given there's no Palestinian state, there's no Israeli-Palestinian peace, but can you connect the dots between the decline of the Labour Party and the failure of the Oslo Accords? Why is it a Labour Party liability in a sense?
I understand. You can find it. It's a very important question. You can find it in the book. As I told you, I used hundreds of polls, public opinion polls, and I think you can learn a lot from reading those polls. Let's say that even after the collapse of the Camp David summit, polls showed that Barak will win Netanyahu. It was a close race. Not to speak, he will win Sharon. Sharon, for 100%, is going to win him in the elections back then, according to the polls. But also the Labour was the first party in the Knesset, around 30 seats back then. But only after the eruption of the Second Intifada, then the decline of the Labour Party started to happen. And people understood, the public, the Israeli public, imagine that. All those years, they're talking about the Oslo peace process, and we need to find a solution, a political solution with the Palestinians, and so on and so on. And suddenly, the Israeli publics find out that the Palestinians are starting a war against Israel. They're starting intifada, that they want to murder Jews, that nothing changes. So of course, who they're going to blame politically in Israel? The party that invented the Oslo peace process. I'm not trying now to start saying there were advantages to the Oslo peace process, and I will be happy to talk about it more today or in another session. But there were advantages and disadvantages for Oslo. But the Israeli public remembered just one thing, as I showed you in that picture. That guy, that terrorist, to murder those two poor reserve soldiers in the lynch in Ramallah. And this is what the Israeli people remember. And they said, the Labour Party, you promised to us peace and security. Look what happened with your promises. So unfortunately, this is the connection that you talk about it. Yeah.
Right. They owned the Oslo Accords or the Oslo process, and as a result, they were punished politically.
And even though afterwards, in the 2003 elections, they continued to champion the Oslo peace process. Okay. And of course, the Israeli public, they laugh about the Labour Party. That's why they won just 19 seats.
All righty. Okay, we'll transition from the chat box to the in-person. Daniel Stetsky, I hope I'm not butchering your name. I apologize in advance if I do. Please go ahead, my friend.
Thank you very much. What I would like to mention and then to ask for the speaker to relate to it. You described, first of all, great presentation, by the way, and congratulations to publishing the book, and most importantly, I would say, even translating that book. So it should travel far and wide. The aspect that I would like to highlight, I'm a demographer, is that over the period that you have described, so it's almost 30 years, over 30 years, Israel has undergone a significant, very significant demographic change. It's customary, and it's not wrong, to mention the fact that the Israeli, let's say, nationalist or religious population has grown in that period. That is correct, that happened. But two other things happened as well. First of all, the population, Israel had gone through Orientalization, and I'm talking about the Jewish population of Israel, because historically, the Jews from a Middle Eastern context and North Africa were more fertile. They made more children than the Ashkenazi. When these children move into the voting ages, that creates a reality that has never seen before. The voting population now is predominant. I wouldn't say predominantly, but it's dominated by people of Oriental origin to much greater extent than in the past. And if that's not enough, then the Ashkenazi population changed since 1992 because it acquired a very significant component of people who are freshly arrived from Eastern Europe. And these people were never known for their leftist tendencies, particularly when it comes to the far left. Center left, they can't tolerate. So those three processes happened, and I would, if you are in a position to do so, would very much like to hear your comments on. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Dr. Weltman, go ahead, please. So we're talking about demography, about the changing of body politics, the rise of Mizrahi or Sephardi politics in that sense, perhaps starting in 1977.
Those things that I hate to talk about it, but I have a great answer for you all. First of all, Daniel, it's great to meet you in person. I think Daniel you're in England, I guess. So I'm sitting in Bristol. I think you're in London. We're more close. We finally meet in person. So Eli, thank you for this great
That's what we do here. We make connections.
That's it. It is all true what you said about demography, but how can you explain? I won't try to counter question you right now, but I just show everyone a fact, okay? Because we're dealing with facts. If everything is true regarding all those transitional, let's say, changes of the Israeli demography, why in the 1988, the right-wing bloc won 65 seats, and the left-wing, center-left-wing bloc won 55. The same thing happened and lasted almost all the time. So nothing changes in Israeli politics. The demography changes, but the Israeli politics, the balance of power between the right and the center-left, I think, personally, that most of the Israeli parties are located in the left. We have a very comprehensive, not in the left, sorry, in the center. We have a very comprehensive center in Israeli politics. There is no much difference between Netanyahu, Benny Gantz, and Eisenkot, Lieberman, Bennett. Okay, most of them, 95% of the things, they will think the same. I'm talking about, let's say, from a security aspect. Even economically, there are few, of course, differences, but the majority of things they're quite the same. But as we see, the balance of power between those two blocks, I'm not putting the Arabs inside, remain the same. Another thing, the ultra-Orthodox, okay? Also, the number of the ultra-Orthodox in mandates, in seats in the parliament, it's always the same, around 18, 16, 18. Sometimes there is a difference, but it lasted the same. So the demography changes, but the balance of power is not. And this is a fact. It's something that we see the numbers. The numbers are not like.
All righty. I'm going to switch gears to a Q&A box question. This is from our very good friend, David Siegel over there. To what extent is the shift to the right in Israel a reflection of the general shift to the right in other democratic states, rather than a uniquely Israeli phenomenon? In other words, it's not about Israel. There's something bigger, broader, global almost.
This is a very good question. And I'm happy to answer it because I'm someone who live abroad and I'm a freak of polls, opinion polls. So I'm checking what's going on in France, here in the UK, and also in Germany. I used to live in Berlin for 5 years. So, when we came after 1 month, then all the immigrants, the refugees from the Middle East, from Syria came, not because of me, I hope, but this was the case. I'm not sure that the public is shifting to the right, and I will explain.
In Israel, you mean? In Israel itself?
In Israel, as I said, the balance of power stayed the same. According to the public opinion polls, I write every week to Israel Hayom. Sometimes they translate my columns to English. I write a lot about the polls. Let's take the majority of the polls in Israel. We can see that the right wing is not going to win in the upcoming elections. On the contrary, they're going to lose big time. Okay, we see the balance of power right now in the polls, but let's see what's going on in the last U.S. elections between Trump and Kamala Harris. Trump maybe won lots of electors, but the gap was less than 2%. This is a draw, okay? What happened? 2% or 3% moved from that side to the other side. This is not a shift to the right. It's not a massive shift to the right, if you know what I'm saying. In Germany, it is true that that again there is a big shift to the right, but even before we remember that there was around 50% to the AfD, Alternative for Germany, and also for the Union, the CDU and the CSU, the Merkel's and now Friedrich Merz party. But let's talk for a second about the UK in order to explain that trend. What is going on right now in the UK? The Reform UK gaining lots of support here. But it is true that if there will be an elections here, they're going to win a majority in the parliament. But it's because of the system. The winner takes it all. Because of the political system, the voting system here. But actually in the polls, they're getting less than 30%. In the last election, they won just 5 seats, but they won 14% of the votes. They jumped from 14, let's say, to 28 on the expense of whom? The Conservative Party, and also a bit from the Labour Party. So we see a change, but not that massive change. I'm not sure that the public goes to the right. There is like a small shift, like it moves. It depends when, from time to time. But of course, we can't argue what we see what's going on here in the UK and also in Germany with the Muslim immigration, and people are frightened from this, and that's why we see it illustrated in the polls, in the opinion polls, with the election polls. So yeah, but not massively. This is what I'm
Right.
trying to say.
So perhaps some of the terms are kind of irrelevant today, and we should talk about populism and not necessarily just right
You know,
wing. There's all kinds of
populism.
variations.
Populism, it depends, you know, for one person, the other side is a populist, for the other one is a fascist, the other one is a liberalist. I really believe that most of us are located in the left, and the worst enemy of the barbarian is the other barbarians from the other side. So I'm really thinking that most of us are located in the center.
All right. A question from the chat box. As socioeconomic polarization increased in the recent decades, why did the labor fail to mobilize the resulting anger and frustration? And I'll put it slightly in different terms, kind of relating to a question that I wrote down. Why couldn't labor offer a more compelling story, a more compelling narrative, despite the difficulties? Parties change, ideologies change, the story changes, the narrative changes. Why couldn't they adapt, acclimate, offer something new?
They tried offer something new with the social democracy, but no one really cares about it in Israel. The majority of Israelis, they're not solely capitalist, but they don't want to support people who don't work. Okay, and the majority of Israelis, they have an agenda that it's more capitalist than a socialist. And Shelley Ychimovich, she tried, and the result was only 15 seats in the parliament. Of course, Amir Peretz tried it, but Amir Peretz didn't have a chance because he's labeled as even I don't want to say a communist because he's not, because this is how he was labeled, a very socialist figure in the Israeli politics. But the labor didn't have a chance. Why? As I said in my lecture, take Avi Gabay, for instance, a brilliant person, a centrist figure. He wasn't a left wing. He spoke all the right things during the campaign in 2019, but against him was Benny Gantz, and it is a very personal elections and choice. And if you need to choose between former chief of staff Benny Gantz, and he was the supermodel back then of the Israeli politics, let's say, the hot name of the Israeli politics, Avi Gabay didn't have a chance. And I support this argument, and I can prove it why. Check the polls before Benny Gantz entered the race. Avi Gabay, in one poll, got, I think, 24 seats. It's in the book, okay? 24 seats, and he was very close to Netanyahu. I think a gap of 5-6 seats. So again, it's not the ideology. It's mostly, unfortunately, the character and who is the leader of the party, and more importantly, who is against him.
The exactly. Personalization of politics. All righty, exactly. I see a very good colleague of ours who recently retired, Paul Sham. Please go ahead, Paul. Professor Paul Sham, who's my predecessor and a major pillar of the Gildenhorn Institute.
Thank you. Thank you very much for a very timely talk. I've been struck for many years by the lower quality of the actual leadership, not the popularity, but the ability of the labor leadership for this century in actually building a party. At the moment, Golan is running steady at 10 to 12 mandates. Do you think, and there's no one else in sight, you think with better leadership, or do you agree that the center left hasn't been well served by the leadership, and you see anyone who might provide supplementary or different leadership for the center left? Or do you see it as a permanent or long-term being stuck at that point?
Thank you, Professor Sham. Again, also, it's a great opportunity to meet you. We're friends in Facebook, so great opportunity to meet you in person. Again, thank you, Eli, for this. I meet all my Facebook friends here. Listen, it's a tough question, but I will answer. I endorse tough challenges, especially when it's relating to politics. Speaking about the center left, okay, I don't want to speak about the leadership in Israel. I can, if you want, but I think that right now, let's start with Israeli politics as a whole. I think that after Netanyahu era will end eventually, if not now, in these elections. I don't think he's 77 years old next year. I don't think that he will run again. Maybe this election, maybe he will quit in the middle. I don't see it happening, okay? Even after October 7th. I'm not sure that he personally want to run for another time. I'm not talking about now, I'm talking about afterwards. I don't want to start talking whether Netanyahu is a good leader or a bad leader. He has lots of advantages, like any person. He has also disadvantages. But the main disadvantage right now in relating to your question is that he's, unfortunately, for a leader, is quite old, okay? And I don't think he will run again. But when we're talking about an alternative in the center-left bloc, before we'll speak about Bennett, okay? Right now, what we see so many figures with a small number of mandates in the polls, okay? They are not running together, and as we can see, we see pieces of small figures, not even, we see figures, like we talked before, Eli, there is the personal people and not the parties. We see Eisenkot, who knows what is, we know Yashar, straight, but no one really knows. Bennett doesn't have even a name for his party. People vote for a leader. So we can see that there are so many people, but they're gaining 6, 7, 9, 10 sometimes seats. So right now we don't see someone from the center left that can challenge Netanyahu. However, this is very funny. Why? Because Bennett, when I don't think many of you remember, but before Bennett was prime minister, all the center left bloc, he was their greatest enemy, okay? I don't know if you remember, I will call you his plan to annex sea territories in the West Bank, Judah and Samaria. He was the enemy of the center-left bloc, okay? But for throwing Netanyahu out of prime minister, he's suddenly the angel. He's the messiah of that bloc. But we can see right now, it's very interesting. According to the polls, we see him with 22 seats, but 10 seats out of those 22 are from right-wing voters. The other 12, more or less, are from a centrist voters. For example, those who used to vote for Benny Gantz, Machane Mamlachti, how you say it in English, so maybe someone will help me, like blue and white. Okay, you understand what I'm saying, okay? But what happened is that people are looking for someone who can beat Netanyahu, and Bennett right now is the only one who can do it. But I can assure you, and mark my word, if there will be a comprehensive version, like the comprehensive version of Kahol Lavan, for example, if Eisenkot unites with Lapid, with Lieberman, and I don't know, with Yoaz Hendel, the Reserve Party, the Miluimnikim, what will happen then? Suddenly, automatically, at the beginning, they will start with around 18 seats, according to the polls, if you take all of them together. And what will happen to Bennett? I believe that Bennett will shrink because the center left-wing voters looking for someone who can win Netanyahu and the right-wing bloc. And I believe that the political landscape will change if something like this, like a big bang will happen. But we still have time, I guess, almost 10 months until the election. So anything can happen, especially in Israeli politics.
That is absolutely true. Never say never in Israeli politics. Let me take a step back. I see that Daniel has another question, but before we turn to him, with your permission, I'll ask a kind of a fundamental question, a question about vocabulary, terminology, if you'd like. Where and what is the Israeli center today? You talk about center left, center right, and so on and so forth. And Paul Sham recently co-edited a book about the center who cannot hold. But where is the center? Where is the Israeli mainstream today? Is it Itamar Ben-Gvir? Is it Smotrich? Is it Gantz? Lapid? Where is the center?
First of all, it depends when you ask me this question. But according, let's say, to the last elections, I think Netanyahu, between Netanyahu, because Netanyahu is not a real right-wing person, he's a center-right, okay? Netanyahu agreed, even though he denounced it, but he agreed for a Palestinian state. Even, there is not much a difference in opinion between Rabin and Netanyahu. This is the truth that need to be said. Both of them agreed for minus Palestinian state. Okay, the last speech of Rabin in October 1995, it's almost a resemblance for the Bar Ilan speech or other speeches of Netanyahu from even recently. So this is the main, let's say, this is the center of gravity of Israeli politics, okay? People ask me what I am. I'm a radical centrist, okay? So I think most of the Israelis are like this, but of course not Ben-Gvir. Ben-Gvir, it's a far right, even though many in Israel today say that he was right on many things, but he's still a right wing, a far right. Like Yair Golan is, and not even Yair Golan, let's say figures in his party, they are radical left, okay? But again, as I said, not much difference between Lieberman, Bennett, Netanyahu, Benny Gantz, Yair Lapid, and they will agree on, I believe, 85, even 90% of the things. Too bad that they can't form a coalition. I'm praying to God that after the election, we will see a different coalition in Israel, a union coalition that can move forward Israel to a better, even better future than now.
All righty, we have only a few minutes. So Daniel, if you want to ask your question, I think you still have your hand up. If that's intentional, wonderful. If not, I have one more question. Not if you want to ask the question, but just a reminder, a question is a sentence with a question mark at the end. Just please keep it brief if you don't mind.
I'm okay actually. So go on with your question.
Oh, fantastic! All righty. So we talked about the flaws, so to speak, in the Labor Party or the. What's the responsibility of the other side? It's always kind of, there's two camps or two sides to the same coin. So what did the other, quote unquote, other side do to erode, if you'd like, or undermine the image or the popularity or the appeal of the Labor Party in these 30 years since 1992?
I think that the one to be blamed, there are two. The first is the Labor Party, because they, if we take the Oslo peace process, they championed it, they invented it. Again, there were advantages and disadvantages, of course. I think that in many aspects, the Oslo peace process, the Oslo Accords, endorse the Israeli national security in several aspects, of course, in order to curb the binational state threat. But besides the Labour Party, I think that they should go and blame people like Benny Gantz, okay, of not joining the Labour Party. I think he made a great decision to, and also history proved that he made a great decision. We saw it in the number of seats he won in the elections. But I think that, like I explained, people who traditionally would have joined the Labour Party back then in the 1990s, 1980s, 1970s, refrained from do so following the Oslo Accords, the failed Oslo Accords, the failed process, let's be more clear. And they believe that a new brand can bring, they can win with the help of a new brand. So I don't think that we can blame someone, this is part of the game, but if thinking to blame the right wing, Netanyahu or other people, I don't think so, because, they did their job. It's like asking what the left has done or the center-left parties did in order to erode the popularity of Netanyahu. This is part of the game, as long as it's not involving violent or disobedience, calling for disobedience and all of this, and not to draft and all those horrible things we saw. I think it's part of the game. And in comparison to other political landscape, I think in Israel we have a very strong democracy, and I think that we have a lot to be proud of, even today.
Interesting. Aaron Barak made a very interesting observation just the other day about the resilience of Israel democracy. So I'm looking forward to that. You're a commentator, among other things. You're an academic, and you write a column for Israel Hayom. So let me put you on the spot now. Moving forward into this election year of 2026, whether that will be somewhere in the summer or early fall or towards the end in October, November. So what's the prediction? What's the political prediction? If Yair Golan is now the new center-left, whatever Democratic Party is, and if there's other players on the field who are not there but are part of this oppositional camp, what's the prediction?
It's what I want to be a prediction, or what I think.
No, it's not about your personal views, albeit very important as a conversation, but as a pundit, it's somebody who is looking at this reality, who wrote a book about 30 years of decline of the Labour Party. What's the professional expectation moving forward to this election year?
Okay, first of all, you all remember. Listen, it's a very tricky and tough question, and I'm
Absolutely,
happy for this.
On the record. This is recorded, my friend. Absolutely.
You know who they gave the prediction to? The fools. Okay, I'm translating this from Hebrew now, and you are not the fools. I hope I won't be the fool of the village predicting wrongly. But I will try to maneuver with this question because I'm not afraid from giving answers and predictions. I will say something like this. Let's be serious for a second. It all depends, and I hinted it before. It all depends what will happen in the central left. Let's say in the anti-Netanyahu, I don't like to say the word anti, but let's say in the anti-Netanyahu camp, what they will do, whether there won't be any unification between Eisenkot, Lapid, Gantz, and all those former blue and white comprehensive version with other figures, because I believe that if they will run together, then Bennett will go down. Potentially can be less than 10 seats. Mark my word, if this can happen. Okay? So I give you some a bit yellow. However, I'm really puzzled because, to be honest, I don't believe to the polls of Channel 14. Even many will be happy with those results, okay? I think, and I will explain if you give me another minute, because it's very important, because this is something I deal with it a lot. Traditionally, there was a difference in the polls. We were not expecting that all polls will be the same, but traditionally there was, let's say, a gap of up to 4 seats between, let's say, channel 12 to channel 14 to all the rest of the channels. I'm talking about back then it was newspapers, 1992, 1988, okay? Most of them, they show the same. When it was important, let's say in the 1992 elections, when Geocartografia, if someone remembers, they said that the right wing will win 62 seats and the Rabin coalition will win 58, and Mina Tzemach said 61 to 59, for example. But traditionally, there was a gap of, let's say, up to 4 seats. It was also happening in Israel in 2023. Until when? October 7. Since October 7, we see a gap of 15 mandates. This is crazy. I cannot explain this. I don't want to say it's a fraud, okay? But I don't know what's going on here. And in my last column in Israel Hayom, I wrote that I'm anxious of what can happen potentially in Israel if one side will think that the election, it has half of the public, when they're watching 14 or they're watching channel 12, I don't want to say social engineering, being a social engineering, that this is the upcoming result. But when we see such a gap, what will happen if, for instance, one side will think that the election were fraud? I don't want to think what can happen if it goes to violence in Israel. I don't think so, but we need to bear it in mind. We never thought that October 7 can happen, but we need to bear in mind to watch all those polls with careful viewing and with proportions. But if I need to bet,
that's what I'm asking you.
But it's free, I can do it.
Yeah.
I think, first of all, it's going to be a fascinating elections, like all the time, but I don't think that Netanyahu is going to win these elections, not after October 7. This is what I think. But again, according to right now, I don't know what will happen in the next 10 months. Maybe we'll have a normalization with Saudi Arabia. I doubt it, but anything can happen. I like David Siegel here. I agree, it will never happen. But I think that according to the most of the polls, Netanyahu is not going to win, but who knows?
Who knows? Well, probably the Labour Party or the Democrats.
The Labour
will not
Party,
be
I can assure you, Eli, that the Labour Party will get, the Democrats,
Yeah.
they can get much less. Because if there will be a unification in the center parties, Gantz, Eisenkot, Yair Lapid, and Lieberman, then they will drink, like we say in Israel, they will take votes from Yair Golan, like they will take votes from Bennett. This I can
Alrighty,
assure
folks.
you.
Dr. Veltman, Ori Veltman, please accept our gratitude for a wonderful, wonderful conversation, wonderful presentation. Congratulations on the new book. Thank you so much, everybody, for attending this event. I hope you enjoyed. We are really looking forward to seeing you in the spring. My apologies. Please take care. Stay warm if it's cold in your neck of the wood. Otherwise, let's meet together once again in January 2026. Happy holidays. Happy New Year if I don't see you. Take care.
Thank you.